Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we're studying a new system. It's a lymphoid immune system. At the beginning, we must know what is the lymphoid system, including the lymphoid system, which is responsible for the immunological defense of the body. Some of its components like bone marrow, spleen, lymph nodes, many of lymph nodes, tonsils, and thymus are surrounded by connective tissue capsule, while the other component like the diffused lymphatic system, it's not be capsulated. Also, the lymphoid system can be divided into two categories, a primary and secondary. The primary, it's including the thymus and bone marrow, while the other like spleen, lymph node, tonsils, and the diffused lymphatic system, it's lined under the secondary lymphoid system. We're beginning at the lymph node. The lymph node, it's a small oval in shape, encapsulated and interposed in the path of the lymph vessels to serve as filter and removal of the bacteria and many of foreign substances. It's located at a various region of our body, like neck, axilla, and at the long major vessels, also many of body cavities. Their parenchyma, starting from the cortex to the central of medulla, are containing many of cells that's including T and B lymphocyte, macrophages, dendritic cells, follicular dendritic cells, and finally stromal cells. Each lymph node having two surfaces. It's a convex and concave surface. Convex and concave. At the convex surface, which is considered the place of perforated by efferent lymphatic vessels. So it's the site of the entrance, the efferent lymphatic vessels. The internal lumen of these vessels having a valve. The function of these valves to ensure the lymph is from these vessels enters the substances to the node. While the concave surface of the node, which is represented by a hilum, it's a site of arteries and veins entering and the exciting of the efferent lymphatic vessels. So the entrance of efferent lymphatic vessels at the convex, while the efferent lymphatic vessels leaving at the hilum of the concave surface. Also, the efferent lymphatic vessels having a valve to its internal lumen, that is to preventing the regurgitation of the lymph back to the node. Histologically, we can divide the node or the lymph node into three main layers, starting from outside by the cortex and paracortex, and at the center it's the medulla. Okay, previously we talking that the lymph node It's one of the other component of lymphoid systems having or surrounding by capsule. These are the capsule, as we see. At the capsule, which is a regular collagenous connective tissue capsule, sending a trabecule or a septa. So it's divided this node into the incomplete or unseamed compartment. Okay. Also, the capsule is very thick at the side of the hilum as the vessels enter the substances of the node. Also, they surrounding by connective tissue sheath. هذا أتكلم على الهايلم, the site of the hilum. It's connected by a sheath. These sheaths are derived from the capsule and suspended from the capsule and trabecule by a three-dimensional network of reticular connective tissue that's forming the architectural framework of the entire lymph node. So, we must know what is the direction of the lymph that's starting with the efferent lymphatic vessels until reach to the efferent and leaving the node. The lymph enter at the efferent lymphatic vessels at the convex surface of the node and empty the lymph at the subcapsular. This site is considered a subcapsular site containing a sinuses. So empty from the efferent lymphatic vessels to the subcapsular sinuses. After that, enter the parenchyma of the node at the cortex and empty to the cortical sinuses. Also the cortex having a sinuses. After that, it's derived the lymph into the medulla. Also, it's a site of a sinuses. After that, it's calling medullary sinuses and continuous until reach to the efferent lymphatic vessels at the concave site of the node and leaving the node. So it's starting with the efferent lymphatic vessels, subcapsular sinuses. After that, empty its content at the cortical sinuses, continuous with the medullary sinuses until reach to the hilum and leaving by the efferent lymphatic vessels. Each sinuses are containing or having a network of stellate reticular cells. Stellate reticular cells, whose processes that contact those to other cells, and the endothelium. هذه التسمية الاندوثيليوم احنا نسميها بالفاسيكولار سيستم اللي هي تكون الانتاير epithelium of the lumen. نسميها احنا as usual endothelium, but it is a simple squamous epithelium. So منا وجاي وين ما نقول endothelium, it's represented as simple squamous epithelium. Collagen fibers are coated by processes of the reticular cells and forming a loose web into the lumen of these sinuses. Also, it's a reduction to the velocity of flow of the lymph and thereby providing the macrophages that's attached to the stellate reticular cells. Also, there is additional channels. These channels are present that allow the lymph to flow from the subcapsular sinuses and from the trabecular sinuses to prevenular channels that are surrounding a highly endothelial venules. We can sample it HEVS, a highly endothelial venules of the paracortex. After that, these channels are known as a fibroblastic reticular cell conductors. Because of they are formed by a fibroblastic reticular cells, also by a fibrillin coated by a collagen fibers and surrounding by a basal lamina. Now we coming at each side of the node, starting with the cortex. At this image represented the capsule. These are the collagenous irregular connective tissue capsule of the node, and this is the afferent lymphatic vessels with its valve from internal lumen, and it's the site of the subcapsular sinuses, and after entering the parenchyma of the node, which is represented the cortex. At the cortex, which is considered a site or a house of a lymphoid follicles. So the cortex is represented a site of a lymphoid follicles. We have two types of lymphoid follicles, primary and secondary lymphoid nodules or lymphoid follicles. The incomplete compartment with the cortex, it's a house of primary lymphoid nodules, which is a spherical aggregate of B lymphocytes, both virgin B cell and B memory cell. So this lymphoid consider a house of B cell and B memory cell, located as a cluster around a follicular dendritic cells. Follicular dendritic cells, whose processes that contact with the neighboring to another follicular dendritic cells. Also, this connection between the processes of these two sites forming a three-dimensional web-like network. In addition to the B cells, also some of T cells can located and present. We have also previously mentioned that we have two types of lymphoid nodules, primary and secondary. When the center of the lymphoid nodules are stained paler, like this, stained paler, at this time we name it a germinal center. When the lymphoid nodules having a germinal center, we call it a secondary lymphoid nodules. Also, the secondary lymphoid nodules having, or it's considered a site of a B memory cells and plasma cells. Okay. Also, these regions of the lymphoid nodules at the peripheral of the germinal center, it's composed a dense accumulation of small lymphocytes that are migrated from their site to the origin within the germinal center. And this peripheral region, it's called corona or mantle. اللي هنا لحقتنا الكورونا مع الأسف. So it's the direction and the peripheral site of the germinal center. هذا الperipheral site, it's called a corona. Germinal centers play three zones at the germinal center of the lymphoid nodules. So these are the lymphoid nodules, a secondary lymphoid nodules because it's having a germinal center, and the germinal center, it's divided into three zones: dark zone, basal light zone, and apical light zone. The dark zone is the site of the intense proliferation of closely packed B cell, and these cells are known as centroblasts. So the B cells at the site of dark zone, it's called a centroblast. After that, migrated into the basal light zone, and these B cells known as a centrocyte. After that, it's migrating to the apical light zones. Okay. هذا فيما يخص عندنا cortex. It's a house of the lymphoid nodules, both lymphoid nodules, primary and secondary. The secondary which having a germinal center of its center. After that, we coming at the paracortical zone or paracortex, which is considered a site of rich in T cells and located between the medulla and the follicle-rich region. It's a cortex. So it's the middle site between the cortex and medulla. And finally, we coming at the center of the node. It's a medulla. At the medulla, also we having composed a large tortuous lymph sinuses that's surrounding by lymphoid cells and organized in a cluster known as a medullary cord. So we having at this site of the medulla, we having a medullary sinuses, which is the site of drainage the lymph and continuous to the outer of the node, and medullary cords, which is represented a site of the lymphoid cells or immune cells accumulation. What is these cells? It's like lymphocyte, plasma cell, and macrophages. Also, it's enmeshed in a network. Previously, we talking about it and name it a cord. After that, the lymphocyte migrate from the cortex and enter the medullary sinuses, and from which they enter the efferent lymphatic vessels, and after that, leaving the node. Like this image. Leaving the node by the efferent lymphatic vessels. Also, these are the diagram mentioned previously when I talking about the direction of the lymph that's starting from the efferent until reach and end by the efferent lymphatic vessels. After that, we coming at the second organ of the lymphoid system, which is a tonsils. We have three types of tonsils that's distributed in our body. It's a palatine, pharyngeal, and lingual tonsils. It's collectively a whole ring. They are incompletely encapsulated. Aggregation of lymphoid nodules, and many with some of it with a germinal center, and the other without this center. It's primary. And because of their location, the tonsils are interposed into the path of airborne and ingesting antigens. So it's the direct site of the ingestion of the antigens. Okay, type number 1, starting with the palatine tonsils. It's bilateral palatine, located at the boundary of oral cavity and oral pharynx between the palatoglossal and palatopharyngeal fold. The deep aspect of each palatine tonsils is isolated from the surrounding connective tissue by dense fibrous capsule. So the deep aspect يعني نقصد بيه هذا السايت هو يكون dense fibrous irregular collagenous connective tissue capsule, while the superficial aspect of these tonsils are covered by epithelium. نروح ونرجع على الابيثيليوم. قلت لكم احنا الامبورتنت بالنسبه لنا بالهيستولوجي هي الابيثيليوم. So the superficial aspect of the palatine tonsils is lined by a stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium. احنا اخذنا بالسكن كان عندنا stratified squamous keratinized epithelium. Now at the palatine tonsils, it's stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium and having about 10 to 12 deep invagination. It's called crypt, like this. Invagination from this epithelium to the inside of the parenchyma of these tonsils, about 10 to 12 deep crypts. Also, so the crypts, it's frequently also containing a food debris and desquamated epithelial cells and dead leukocytes, also bacteria and other antigenic substances. The parenchyma of the tonsils, it's composed of a numerous lymphoid follicles, as we see, and numerous. These are a parenchyma of the palatine tonsils are containing a numerous, as we see, a numerous of the lymphoid follicles. Some of these follicles are secondary, having a germinal center like this, and the other without the germinal, like this, without the germinal center, and like this. It's a primary lymphoid nodules. A close image of the stratified squamous epithelium, of the palatine tonsils, and invagination of the crypt اللي هو يكون مثل الشق from this epithelium to the parenchyma of the tonsil, and these are the parenchyma containing a germinal center lymphoid follicles. Type 2 lingual tonsils. At the lingual tonsils, which is located at the dorsal surface of the posterior 1/3 of the tongue, it's covered by طبعا superficial aspect covered by stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium also. It's like a palatine tonsils. Also having a crypts invagination into the parenchyma, okay, into the parenchyma of the tonsil, of this type of tonsils. And the deep aspect of the lingual having a flimsy capsule separated from the underlying connective tissue. تشوفوها هذه. So the superficial aspect it's lined by epithelium, and the deep aspect it's lined by a flimsy, a very thin connective tissue capsule that's separated from the underlying connective tissues. Also, these tonsils have a numerous of crypts, as previously we talking, and it's received a duct of the mucous minor salivary glands. So it's received its mucus of the minor salivary glands. So it's opening at the minor salivary glands. And the parenchyma of the lingual tonsils also having a lymphatic nodules. Some of these having a germinal center, secondary, and the other is a primary lymphatic nodules or lymph nodules. These are a closed image or closed slide of the lingual. The crypts that's invaginated to the parenchyma lined by stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium, and the parenchyma with the lymphoid nodules. The last one is a pharyngeal tonsils. At the pharyngeal tonsils, which is single pharyngeal tonsils located at a roof of the nasal pharynx. It's similar to the palatine and lingual, but it's having incomplete capsule, very thin. طبعا هذا بالdeep aspect, okay, at the deep aspect, and it's lying by pseudo-stratified ciliated columnar epithelium. Pseudo-stratified ciliated columnar epithelium, and we name it a respiratory epithelium at the superficial aspect. Okay, at this type pharyngeal tonsils, we don't have a crypts. So the main characteristic feature of the pharyngeal tonsils, it's absent of the crypts, the invagination through the parenchyma of these type of tonsils. But we having, instead of the crypts, we having a pharyngeal tonsils shallow. It's a shallow longitudinal enfolding called plates. So because of absence of these crypts, we having another structure. It's called a plates. It's a shallow enfolding longitudinal structure. Also, it's parenchyma having a numerous of the primary and secondary lymphoid follicles. And we're coming at the end of our lecture today, and thank you very much for your attention.